Okay, folks, we might get underway. It's very good to know that there are people still coming into our webinar today. So, very big welcome to today's COTA conversation. It's great to have so many of you joining us this morning. As you know, we hold these webinars regularly on a range of topics, and the topics are identified by older people, the things that they want to know about. So today, as you know, we're talking about the importance of health and well-being to do with gardening. So we were just having a chat with the panelists to find out what sort of weather we've all got there. But as we know, spring has started, and it is a time that we want to get back into gardening. I think all the people that are starting to join us now know the importance of gardening and also the importance of the natural world. However, more and more of us no longer live in a home with a traditional backyard, but we have to learn to best utilise smaller spaces and balconies and courtyards. Where I'm living now, our garden has shrunk right back to here. And I just said to the panelists that I don't really have a green thumb. I'm trying hard, but I do love growing herbs and love cooking with them. And I try very hard to have a space that gives a sense of beauty to where I live. So we have some really very knowledgeable people with us today, and I'll introduce them to you very shortly. But before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are all on this morning. Where I am, it's the Wada Wada people, and they are the First Nation custodians of this area that I'm talking to you from. In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge all traditional custodians of the lands, their connection to land, sea, and community, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and I extend that respect to other First Nations people who are joining us today. So for those of you who don't know about COTA, well, we stand for Council on the Ageing, and we are the peak body for people over 50 in New South Wales. And there's one of us in every state and territory, and there's COTA Australia as well. So we're a policy and advocacy organisation. So our job is to work with politicians, policymakers, and service providers, and very much the media, to make sure that the views of older people are heard and acted on. Apart from our policy and advocacy work on behalf of older people, we do provide the services. So we have the Aged Care Navigator service. That's a very important service to try and help older people navigate the care options available to them. And as many of you know out there, if you've tried to navigate what care options are available to you, then it is a very, very complex system. So we have some workers to help people through that. We also have a program that we're really proud of called Living Longer, Living Stronger, and that's all about exercise and older people. But again, it's not just about the exercise, it's also about connecting people. And COTA New South Wales feels very strongly about the importance of community and people linking with each other. Because as we get older, and very much through COVID, we know that a lot of people felt very lonely, and as sad as this is to share with you, so many older people did die of COVID. So the majority of people who have died of COVID in the last 2.5 years have been people over 50, and some of those people have died alone. And we feel very sad about that. We also have a group called Older Men, New Ideas, and we have a community speakers program. Community speakers program made up of volunteers like myself, and we can go into communities and talk to older people about things that they might be interested in, whether it's saving energy, whether it's to do with navigating the aged care system. So there's a whole range of programs. And sadly, just recently, we had a great program that we love called Legal Pathways. We had run it for 12 years, but it's had to stop because our funding ran out. And we think that's an essential program, which was about making sure older people looked at all those documents that you need before we actually leave this world. So things like wills and so on. So that's a bit sad, but I said to you that we fight for our program, so we're still working with the New South Wales government to see if we can't get more funding for that program. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. So everyone except for the presenters, you're all on mute, the wonderful people out there listening to me, and you haven't got the ability to unmute yourself because this is a webinar, it's not a meeting. There's a Q&A panel, so you can ask your own questions at any time by typing them into the Q&A panel. And you can also upvote someone else's question if they're asking something that you'd like to know. And we'll be answering questions during this panel discussion this morning. And we'll also be adding resources and links after the speakers have finished the session or the conversation this morning. So lots of places to find extra information. There is also a chat panel, as you'll see, where you can make a comment during the presentation. Now, folks, the event is being recorded and it'll be available in the next week on COTA New South Wales YouTube channel, along with all our other previous webinars. So it's a good place if you've got friends and relatives and neighbours that want to know a little bit more about the importance of gardening for health and for joy, then you can send them the link and they can hear about what we're going to chat about this morning. So in 2020, we asked older people what they were doing to try and stay positive during the COVID lockdowns. And guess what? Many of them said gardening. So everyone knows it's an important activity that helps us to connect with nature, to stay active and also improve our own surroundings. Some older people were and are very used to growing their own fruit and veggies, often born out of necessity, and that includes my grandparents. They had a huge market garden. Not only did they feed us, the family and the broader family, but also neighbours as well. I think we are again turning back to the benefits of gardening for both sustenance, but really important for pleasure and to do an activity maybe by ourselves, but also maybe with our partners and friends. I look forward to hearing about the benefits of gardening, and for me, I want to know how to do it better. So I'll be listening very actively, and I suggest that some of you, if you want to, have a piece of paper or pad beside you with a pen or a biro, and you can write down some great ideas. So just once again, remember, you can make comments in the chat panel. I can see some coming through now, and you can ask questions in the Q&A panel. So let's get underway. The first person I would like to introduce is Nari Hobbins. Now, Nari joins us from Tasmania. We're just chatting. She said it's quite chilly down there this morning. Nari has joined us in a previous webinar about the importance of gardening and for health and well-being. She is a dietitian and a keen gardener, and driven by a desire to ensure that all people enjoying their senior years understand their different nutritional needs and to maximise their brain health. So, Nari, great to see you again, and over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everyone. It's a bit of an excitement for me. I spend a lot of time doing work with older people, and I give lots of presentations and education sessions and the like, usually obviously about food, but to sort of branch out slightly into this area is great. 10 minutes is short. I've written books on this. Behind me, there's a picture of my latest book. So there is a lot more information available, but I want to talk to you about why, when you're older, your nutrition needs are different, and a little tiny bit about brain health and why gardening sort of fits into all of that. Because unless you understand the difference between older and younger nutrition needs, then you can suffer decline that I'd like to see avoided. So it all comes from, when you look at all the messages, you might have seen something on the telly or on the newspaper or something or other today, some sort of diet, some sort of exciting nutrition plan that's going to make you great and well and whatever. But almost all of those are people who are actually 30, 40 or 50. And some of the information is fine if you're older, but a lot of it can be actually anything from unhelpful to harmful if you're instead older. So I spend my time trying to get that message through to people, what I write about, what I talk about. And I try and take the science and put it into everyday language. The reason why it's different for older people is that we are designed to grow from that little tiny pudgy baby into an adult structure. And you do that with a whole lot of things I call internal drivers that drive you to build muscle, build bone, build organs, whatever, so that you make that structure that is the full adult. But once you become that adult structure, you're not driven to grow any bigger, or you'd be a giant by the time you're 65 or so. That doesn't happen. So what happens is, if you want to maintain yourself and live well for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years that you've got, once you are, at beyond that stage, then you need to understand the difference, because otherwise I see a lot of decline that's avoidable. It all comes down really to what your muscles do. Your muscles are much more than what you're going to need to get you off your knees in the garden and to walk around and to dig and to do all those things that you do in the garden. Your muscles are much more than that. They're also your reserve, the nutrient called protein. So we don't eat 24 hours a day, but 24 hours a day, your body needs protein to do a number of things. It needs it to fight off illnesses. It needs it to run your immune system, to fight off illnesses and repair you when you've been unwell. It needs protein to replenish body organs. You're always making new cells, heart, kidney, lung, blood, whatever cells. That's always happening. You might have some repair work that needs to be done. Scratches, grazes. I've been pulling out blackberries recently and I'm covered in them. Scratches, grazes, bruises, whatever, repair work. And also, and I'm not going to go into this today, but it also, the protein can be a backup fuel for your brain. Now, what happens in the normal person is that because we're not eating those 24 hours a day, but you're still needing the protein, your muscles give up little bits of protein during the day in the times that you're not eating. And that's fine, because that means you've always got the protein to do all the work that needs to be done. If you're 30 or 40, as soon as you eat, the internal drivers are going to tell it to go back. But the difference is that if you're now beyond that peak adult structure and you're now late 60s, 70s, you won't necessarily put the protein back in your muscles. Now, certainly that'll eventually show in not being able to do as many things as you could before, but it also could affect your immune system, your ability to keep your organs going, repair work, etc. And that is the beginning of the decline that I fight really hard to get people to understand. So the muscle work that you do in gardening is absolutely essential to that, as well as, of course, the food, which, of course, we're going to come back to. I'm racing along because there's not a lot of time to explain all this, but I just want to get the points in. Then when we come, so you've got, obviously, your body. When you come to the brain, what I'd like people to remember is that the vast majority of older people live to an advanced age without having a dementia diagnosis. Sure, dementia is worrying, and there may be 30% of the population over 85 lives with a dementia diagnosis, but that means 70% don't. There are things you can do to reduce your risk. Now, there's chapters on my books and whatever on this, but I would summarize it down to three main things. Three things: activity, food, and meditative practice. So let's go. I've mentioned activity. Staying active is obviously going to build your muscles, but it also keeps the blood pumping through your brain, which keeps it healthy. Then you've got food. Now, the evidence is showing more and more that the things we do to food, from when we change it from its natural state into something that is less natural, so processing basically, some of the things in that process can cause problems in the body, a problem called chronic inflammation, which is one of the main drivers of dementia. We don't understand exactly yet how all these things happen. We just know it happens. So very processed foods and what's called ultra processed foods, foods that basically bear no resemblance to the food, to where they originally came from, those things seem to be causing problems. So the great advantage that older people have is you didn't grow up eating them. So, that's good in itself. But as far as brain health goes, it's eating those foods that have undergone few changes, the things you pull out of the ground, pull off the bush, pull out of the tree, or you get from the paddock next door or out of the river or whatever. Foods that are as close as possible to their original state are the answer, and eating as many of them as you can doesn't mean you can't ever have processed things that are processed, but it means that the more of those things you have, the better off you are, and the better it is for your brain and your body, but particularly for your brain. And then, and I have to talk about this because this is so important, and people growing stuff to eat, or or growing stuff in general, or about digging and all the physical activity. The meditative practice you get from it is so important. Your brain absolutely requires downtime. Now, yes, sleep is useful, but downtime that you're not looking at a screen, not doing something, not trying to think, not trying to work on something, not trying to, you know, do something all the time, which is what our lives are like, giving it a chance to relax. So when you're out in the garden, we all know as gardeners, yes, sometimes you're really busy and sometimes it's hard work, but there are times that you stop, that you look and you go, geez, that's beautiful, or I'm happy with that, or I'm not happy with it, whatever. But, you know, or just enjoy the creatures that are out there, whatever. That is immensely important, and that can't be taken out from this. So every now and then people need to just sit down and relax and enjoy the surrounds of the garden, whether it's raining or not raining. It's very important. I just looking at a messy jungle. Someone said they've got a messy jungle. Mine is also a messy jungle. I don't have time. It's so frustrating at times. But what's interesting, and quickly before I go, because I'm nearly finished, what is interesting, and I did talk about it with Tino and also in the books, is that plants produce antioxidant substances, the things that we use as antioxidant substances that protect our cells. Those substances to plants are not antioxidants that protect their cells. They're actually, a lot of the time, they're substances that protect them from either environmental attack, like heat and cold, or from insect attack, or whatever they produce. Like some things, you know, have that bitter flavour. The bitter flavour deters some insects from attacking them. So plants that are a bit stressed, maybe not stressed, that you know, might have had a bit of insect attack, that have had some sort of thing, you know, we might think that they're a disaster, but actually maybe those plants are trying to fight off the problem they're having, and therefore they might actually be producing more of the beneficial substances that then, if we eat them, you might get a little bit of extra protein from, you know, the grubs. Don't talk about that. But apart from that, if we eat them, we're getting more benefit. So I don't think it matters. I think that messy garden is actually a fantastic thing. And you'll see if you watch that segment that we spend a lot of time looking at my kale, which was completely destroyed by bugs. And but you know, there's benefits. Every single thing you can do in the garden is beneficial to you, whether it's because of nutrition, which of course is what I do, but also whether it's because you're out in the air, you're meditating, you're getting some physical activity. They're all important. And underneath all that, being aware just how different the needs of older people are to younger people is so vital to giving yourself the ability to thrive into later life and not have that decline. I would say, as a little, you know, ad, go to my website, have a look for that book. It's good, you know, it takes it away. You know, don't like to advertise, but you'll find it worthwhile.
Why not?
And I think I made that's 9 minutes, so that's good.
Yes, and Nari, that person who just shared with us about having a messy jungle, apart from just looking at the beauty of it in a way, it's also about it's a place for critters and insects, and how lovely that is as well. And of course all those critters and insects are actually contributing to the soil health. And you know, if you're eating your veggies out of your garden, you're actually getting microorganisms from the soil in little bits that are actually beneficial to us, because of course our brain we're actually more microbial than we are human. So the microbes in not our brain, our gut has huge amounts of microbes, and some of the bacteria from the soil, healthy bacteria, are actually beneficial for that as well. So and I think we've got a new line already. We should be eating our holy plants, the ones that have got holes.
That's a good one.
I like it as well. And doesn't it annoy you when you go into a supermarket and everything has to be so perfect? Now I always go to that place where they're so-called seconds, or you know, they're getting rid of them, and they're absolutely fine. I mean, how absurd is it that we have to have?
There's actually quite good evidence building, that in fact things that are grown in hothouses in large areas are not suffering not being challenged by the environmental stresses that they normally would be, and that you know, it's only a small amount, but it's a difference. And as I say, the people who are now in their later years have actually had that benefit for their whole lives. And that is why this generation is so successful. I do worry a little bit about the younger generation. So people like Phil and Chris and whatever who are doing things to try and Tony, who are trying to engage young people, that's important because they'll get a benefit.
Absolutely. Nari, thank you. I know it's a bit rushed, but you're coming back to us once we open up for broader discussion. So thanks, Nari. I'd now like to introduce Tony Selter to you. Tony's a horticulturist and author and a talkback radio guest with a passion for organic principles. She's helped hundreds of people to grow great tasting, healthy food on their own. This is what I like: balconies, backyards and acreages. So Tony, welcome to our conversation today, and over to you.
And thanks for having me today. It's a real pleasure to join in with you. And I'm in the category of being over 50, so I'm part of you mob. So wonderful to be with you today. Let me share my screen. And I am actually going to be really reinforcing what Nairi has actually just been telling us. So you can see my screen okay there, everything coming through all right? Wonderful, wonderful. So today, let's think about the concept of being prescribed a green prescription. Imagine the reaction of our community if we actually had doctors prescribing a dose of gardening. And this is actually what has been happening overseas. In the UK, we have green care happening, and these are prescriptions that are funded by their national health system. And it's really encouraging us to have a look at the holistic treatments of any sort of disease or ailment that we might have. So we also see a social prescription where people are getting out into the community gardens and the benefits of both being with others as well as being in the garden space. So why this change to a more holistic treatment? It's because of what some of you may have heard, which is biophilia. Now, biophilia is a theory that just really taps into our innate desire or connection with nature. So you see this picture of a wonderful garden space, natural space. Aren't you just immediately drawn in? Don't you just want to follow that path and see where that path takes you? It's a natural thing that is in all of us. We are naturally drawn into that green space. When we choose to go for a walk, we don't go for necessarily a walk around the block concrete jungle. We go in those natural spaces. So we have the natural desire to go into natural spaces and innate, but we also have something called hortophilia, which is the love of gardening. Not only are we drawn with the love of nature, we are drawn for those gardeners. We have a love of gardening. So the green prescriptions that we see are not only for gardeners, but also for the non-gardeners. So let's have a little look and see how we might be able to get our nature dose. There's a lot of research, and Nairi's already mentioned a few things. Let me just see if I can grab a link here for you. Now, this is a link that that just gives you a little bit of information around the incidence of and research that we have seen that that gardening does in fact help reduce anxiety and depression. There are lots of physiological and psychological benefits with gardening, as Nairi has just mentioned some of those for you. Now, an instrumental Australian study was put out by Beyond Blue, and it was called Beyond Blue to Green. And this was funded by Beyond Blue, and it did show significant improvements in well-being of those who spent time in nature and natural elements. Another study has suggested that spending at least 120 minutes a week, so that's 2 hours a week in nature, is associated with good health and well-being. So there is a lot of evidence, research emerging that really does support our not only our desire and natural desire, but it's also clinically proven that we do get those physiological and psychological benefits of gardening. How many of you would get out into the garden every day? I know that I can put my hand up for trying to get out there and do a little bit every day. We have seen the benefits of daily gardening. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit of gardening every day had a 36% lowering of the risk of onset of Alzheimer's. And this was an Australian study done in Dubbo. I noticed somebody that's listening has come in from Dubbo today. So welcome to those in the Central West. And this was an interesting study showing a longitudinal study, so over a long period of time, so that we could see the effects over time of getting out into the garden every day. A little bit of gardening every day goes a long way. So we can have that element of active involvement. One of the research papers that was shown showed the effect of people who have had a cancer diagnosis. And many of us have had a dramatic diagnosis. As we get older, we start facing some major surgery and some major illnesses. Now, with that comes a lot of trauma. And once we get into that state of trauma, we have difficulty in processing a lot of our daily functions. And what was seen with a lot of the patients recovering from surgery was that there was difficulty in remembering the dosage of medication following surgery, difficulty remembering the timing of the dosing, and just general forgetfulness and related to the trauma of major surgery. So many of us can possibly relate to that. So what was done in this gardening experiment was to get those recovering from cancer surgery, was to get them out for 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week. And what was shown was that this cohort that were practicing the gardening, it was only very light duties, but we saw significant improvement in memory. They were much more inclined to stick with their post-operative routine, and hence they got better quickly or quicker than the other cohort. The other thing was that these people developed a much more positive response to their recovery. They were much more hopeful about the outcome of their recovery, and they were much more inclined to get involved with the community. Some of them even went on to take up some voluntary assistance, helping volunteer out in community. So we do know that isolation plays a significant factor in depression, and so to be able to get out and volunteer, be with others, is a significant thing, helping with our overall wellness. And as Nairi mentioned the beneficial bacteria that is in soil. So when we get out into the soil, get our hands dirty, if we're getting our hands dirty every day, we can find that microbe is there to help make us healthy and happy. So this was actually a study that was done on the immune system. It was almost a chance discovery that this bacteria had the ability to enhance the human immune response. That was what was found. And when the researchers looked at where they could find that bacteria, lo and behold, it was there in the soil. So, so it is there to improve your immune system, but it's also there. What was found was this bacteria, beneficial bacteria, was also able to produce in our brains some of the calming, mood enhancing neuropeptides. So in other words, it made us feel happy. So we gardeners will tell you intrinsically that we are happy and healthy people. So this is a research study that actually supports that finding. Not only does gardening and getting active in the soil do these things, you can also have your nature dose in a passive way. So as Nairi had mentioned about looking at that state of mindfulness, and just sitting and being in a garden is very productive for us. So sensory gardens are a fabulous way of being able to engage all those senses, and it keeps us in the moment when we are stimulated by all of our 5 senses. How many of you can see or can identify the 5 senses in play in this little garden? So just in this illustration alone, you can see that it doesn't have to be a large garden. It can be a very small space. And as we downsize with age, we can still be able to put in sensory elements into our garden. Mindfulness and grounding will also help to reduce cortisol and in our bodies, and reduce that level of stress for us. This is a beautiful example, I think, of all those 5 senses at play. You can just be sitting there and listen to the water. You can see the color of the flowers. You can see the movement of the miscanthus grass behind. You can smell the herbs, the lavender in front, the sensory scented geranium in the front stimulates the sense of smell. Throw in a few herbs and veggies and you've got the sense of taste as well. And as you sit, you experience a sense of feeling. You can feel the warmth of the sun. You can feel the coolness of a shady area as well. So these are ways that can help to just ground you and keep you relaxed and in good health. The other thing is that gardening is an intergenerational thing. We all speak the same language when it comes to gardening, and it's a wonderful way of helping us to feel purposeful as we age, and as we may not be able to physically do things as much as we used to, we can still share the information. And passing on that information, the knowledge that we have around gardening is also a beneficial thing. So my 5 tips for you for gardening and to get your nature dose. First one is to practice mindfulness. Have a wander around your garden, as Nairi had mentioned. Check for pests and diseases. Check what is flowering. Just go out and just meander around the garden for 5 minutes a day can have significant effects for you. So practicing mindfulness every single day will help you. Grow some herbal teas. The whole link between inflammation and dementia is there, as was stated. So when you are growing things like turmeric and ginger, they are very strong anti-inflammatory herbs. So when we start replacing our coffee or our tea with some herbal teas that we've grown in the garden, fresh herbal teas just taste so much better than the commercial tea bags. The next one to suggest for you is to make your gardens accessible. And this was a garden that we put into an aged care facility, a little balcony area here with some raised garden beds so that you can enjoy your garden rather than have to endure it. Doesn't have to be a big space. Putting a couple of tabletop gardens like this filled with some greens, get your kale in there or some other greens, and then it becomes something that's easy to do and becomes an enjoyable task. Harvest something every day. Some of you may have heard about the harvest high. When we harvest anything, whether it's flowers, vegetables, herbs, or anything from the garden, it actually stimulates dopamine levels in our brain. Dopamine is the pleasure center and pleasure chemical in our brain. So it makes us happy. So this is me in my happy place as I'm harvesting some of my veggies. So harvest something all the time in your garden, and it gives you a little buzz. The last thing is to do a little every day. And it doesn't have to be extreme activities. It can be very simple activities like these. And in a Japanese study, we have seen that out of these 5 garden activities, watering was the most protective in its effect against protecting against the onset of dementia. So even just going out and watering the garden every day will help to keep you happy and healthy. 12 benefits of gardening: quicker recovery from illness, lowering your stress levels, getting out there and getting some sunshine, improving your mobility and giving you some enjoyable exercise, helping to improve the incidence of osteoporosis, building bones and building those proteins through some of the activities that you have got. It improves your focus and interest, gives some positive things to look forward to when you're waiting for your spring bulbs to flower. It improves your sleep and it just stimulates the mind, reducing the boredom that sometimes we can feel. So to get your to help you get your nature dose as prescribed by the UK doctors, 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week can have significant benefits, or just a little every day. I have put some resources together for you. So you can join my Veggie Club for free. You'll be sent some links that can give you the details with these. The Veggie Club that I've put together just gives you some planting guides and a checklist on what you can do for each month. Keeps you on track so that we get it from there. If you want to upgrade to a VIP club membership, it is a paid subscription from as little as $27 a month. And in that, I will help you. We have some group coaching sessions. So if you've got some questions about your garden, I can then help you along the way. Any questions about diseases and all of those sorts of things, I can help you with those. You have access to all the masterclasses that I have, whether it is all general veggie gardening classes, or also masterclasses on mindfulness technique and how you can use your garden to tap into the 5 senses. You also have a full online course. So a lot of you are into getting more education. If you want to know a little bit more about how to grow successfully, then these online courses will help you. A couple of extra bonuses just to keep you along the way and keep you on track, give you all the resources that I can to try and help you successfully grow your own veggies. So again, just from $27 a month is all that it takes. And if you want to follow me on social media, if you are in the social media space, it's a great way of connecting virtually and explore our gardens together virtually. Okay, so that is it from me. I will stop my share.
Tony, thank you so much. That was just an amazing amount of information in a very short period of time. So thank you. And tell me, do you garden with or without gloves?
Look, I garden without gloves to get as many of those benefits as possible. There are times when I do garden with gloves because it does call for a little bit of harder work, and also if there are any spiders lurking around, then you do need to be careful. And the thing to remember is always wash your hands very carefully after that. A nail brush is a very good investment, and I would actually prefer to wear a dust mask than gloves, because that's where the real problem is. Dry potting mix or dry soils, you can breathe in some of those harmful microbes, and Legionella can be one of the things that is a problem there.
Yes, Tony, one thing that I liked about one of our people in the audience said that she was describing her garden to a friend just recently who was feeling a bit down, and she was describing her garden over the phone to her friend and how it made a difference. Her friend calmed down and just felt a little bit better about life for that particular moment. So I thought that was lovely. As spring comes on, my mum sadly is not with me anymore, but her favourite flower was she used to plant daffodils and jonquils, but jonquils were my favourite. And if I closed my eyes, I can actually smell them, because they were so much part of my childhood. So it is quite remarkable, isn't it? The thing, your senses.
You have the associated memory.
I do.
Yes. So it's actually very good for us when we tap into that sense of smell, because it stimulates that part of the brain that encourages those memories.
Terrific. Great, Tony, thank you so much. Now let's go to our third speaker, and Chris Smith. Now he joins us all the way from WA, so thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. Chris Smith is the Western Australian coordinator and national board member of Community Gardens Australia. So many of you out there, if you're avid gardeners, you know that community gardens are becoming a really important part of our communities. But there is a peak body of over 1,000 or so community gardens right across Australia. He's also the founder and treasurer of his local community garden on the grounds of Murdoch University in Perth. So over to you, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joan, and good morning to everybody. I, like Joan, do not have a green thumb. I call myself the chief marmalade maker for our community garden, and that's one of the things I've wanted to touch on. And what I might do is, we've heard some terrific information there about the nutritional value and other health benefits of gardening generally, and I will steer clear of those, but mention in passing some of the other great benefits that come of the community of gardening, shall we call it. I should establish what we're talking about in relation to community gardens first. The community gardens are a broad church, shall we say. Essentially, from Community Gardens Australia's point of view, we don't want to pigeonhole, but just to give you an idea of what community gardens can be and are across Australia, They're essentially gardens that have been established by and for the community. So they need to have an element of access for people to come and use and benefit from the space and the experience. The typical ones grow vegetables, but many grow other plants as well. There are community gardens which are called fruit forests, where people can have access to a public space and actually pick fruit as they choose. Usually there's a sign up that says don't go overboard with it, but essentially it's available to the public. The forms of the community gardens take, generally there's two types. One is where there's communal gardening, where people come and do work in the garden, the weeding. Someone might make the tea, various other duties or activities within the garden. And the group then benefits from it by taking a proportion of the harvest. There are also, and sometimes there's a mix, allotment type gardens where people will pay for a certain area of space for the year. Sometimes this is $50 a year, sometimes 100, where they have responsibility for a plot. They also have exclusive access and right to garden. These are often the cases. This is those of you who might have grown up in the UK or travelled there would be familiar with allotments for those people, especially if they're living in small apartments or areas where they don't have land to put their garden. There are also city farms. These are bigger areas which actually produce a lot of food in the agricultural space, and they would be for sale as well, the produce from city farms. And then there are the little odd gardens around the place. There are verge gardens, where people are happy on private land, in some cases, to provide access to the community. And that includes farmers who might provide community access areas on their farm. So you can see there's a great range. Often the gardens are on council land, in which case negotiations need to take place between the gardeners and the council, or in any case, the owner of the property. My own garden is at a university where we negotiate for some space for students and staff and people in the local community to come and use the garden. Aged care homes is a good proportion of community gardens that are members of Community Gardens Australia, and they've been set up, and we saw just a very small one that Tony just put up on the screen. So they take many forms as well. It's extremely beneficial for new developments, particularly where there's close housing or dense residential housing, to allow some area for growth, for gardening generally, and also particularly for vegetable, herb and fruit growing in residential areas. So you can see that we're talking here about access for many people to come and benefit from the garden. I'll come to the benefits that provides shortly, beyond just the or beyond the personal health and well-being. I can say that there's probably 1,000 or so gardens in Australia. You can find the ones that have been listed that we've kept up with on the Community Gardens Australia website. In fact, the landing page is a map of Australia, and it's an interactive map. You can click on your state, on your region and find the nearest community garden that we know of in your vicinity. When I say that element of doubt in relation to the number is because we would think that there's a new community garden each week in Australia, probably. So this is a movement that we're trying to keep pace with, shall we say, around Australia, and it's being encouraged. And you'll hear about the benefits, that some of which you've already heard. It's being encouraged by local governments, by state governments, by professional bodies, the benefits of creating these spaces, and you will be familiar with them already, but if not, certainly some of the things you've heard this morning should confirm those benefits. Community gardens are also community run, so they are community groups invariably. They're incorporated associations like other community groups and sports clubs and community organisations. They tend to be funded through membership fees, which are always modest. I would say that the membership fees of most are between, say, 10 and 25 a year to have access to communal gardening. Some have a more professional approach to it, so that they can underwrite the employment of a gardener, part-time invariably, or garden coordinator or manager, but most are not. Most are volunteer organisations. Everybody chips in like any other community organisation that what you'd know in your neighbourhood. They also have access to grants. Some state government and bigger benevolent organisations regularly or have at least open access to grant applications on a competitive basis. I know in Western Australia, for instance, the Department of Communities actually has a community garden grant scheme each year. But most gardens will also find access through other foundations, through lottery commissions, and also through the private sector as well. In addition to that, community gardens will often sell their produce. Our income from my garden at Murdoch Community Garden in south of Perth at the university there, half of our income comes from the sale of lemon curd and marmalade and potted plants and dried herbs, those kinds of things. Another one is the community of gardens, as I've mentioned as well, does a lot of sharing. So there are Facebook pages that keep people in contact with each other and through our national website. But also every weekend there are workshops at various gardens around the state, and those share information, share knowledge about the gardening, but also about other things, other cultural things, and also about producing marmalades, shall we say, various other foodstuffs that are generated in the garden. So workshops is another means also of income for the sustainability of a garden. I will touch on some of the benefits that haven't been made so far to date. And this was that there were some benefits that were proven, sadly, should I say, through the COVID lockdown experience. In fact, in 2020, there was a national survey of gardening, the pandemic survey it was called, and it did prove that that people resorted to their garden. They valued their garden more. They produced more food in that period and of the survey, and they also shared more food. lower socioeconomic families relied more on their garden than the more wealthy ones. There were a number of valuable insights that were gleaned from that survey, and I can share that link after this webinar for people to go and have a look at. There were excellent recommendations as well on how government should respond to make these opportunities open to people. One of the benefits that I think I should emphasise is the sense of resilience and self-reliance that comes with gardening. This idea of food security has come home to people in Australia who have been so used to going to the supermarket and the shelves being full, or food being at a reasonable price, out of season. These are things that we came to assume, and that were challenged in recent times by COVID, sometimes, and also by droughts and floods. So the modern experience has challenged some of those assumptions that we've become used to, particularly in the suburbs, and these are have shown the benefit of having access to growing some of your own food. Not all of it. It's enough to be able to have some element of a meal that you have produced to ensure a sense of additional well-being beyond simply the nutritional value. This also reduced the cost of feeding a family if you can find some aspects of meals that you've grown yourself. One of the things that we've also found is that community gardens provide an opportunity for access to culturally appropriate food. So you'll find, particularly in the in Indigenous communities, in immigrant communities, refugee communities, have been able to grow the things they're familiar with as part of their culture, and as part of their knowledge about food. So this is an important aspect that community gardens can provide. And I think we've mentioned the fact that it's fresh food. There's nothing like picking the herbs straight out of the garden. I think you might be doing this, Joan, out of your out of a window box even, and adding that to your meal. The only last thing I would mention, which is a general one, and that is that it also provides the opportunity, like other community groups do, for people to have access to each other. So there's the conversations, there's the sense of inclusion, there's the community building that is so important that volunteer organisations and in this case gardens can provide for a neighbourhood, for a community. So I might leave it there, and I'm very happy to answer questions when the panel comes on.
Great, thanks very much, Chris. A couple of things that I was just going to ask you. So if people join a community garden, then they pay that membership fee, whatever that might be. It'll vary according to the organisation or the garden group. So they can then, if they participate in that community garden, they can take some of the produce.
Yes, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I also like the idea that research that was done during COVID. I think Phil just put up something. There were 9,000 people who participated in that research. So it would be good to have a link for that, especially for organisations like ours, because we always need the evidence about the benefits of certain programs. And I don't know, folks out there, if you've been watching that ABC program around older people and preschoolers, and now there's one on the ABC about older people and teenagers. And I like that concept of gardening, or an activity that actually unites our generations. So that whole intergenerational aspect of gardening, I think, is really important. So Chris, thanks. We'll come back to you soon. Our last speaker is Phil. Phil's an educator and a community development worker, and he's part of the Botanic Gardens community greening program, and also an advisor around things to do with gardening. The important work that Chris does is to inspire social housing residents in the importance of community gardening. So Phil, over to you.
Thanks, Joan. And yeah, I think we're a little short on time, so I won't try to talk too much. I do have a bit of a PowerPoint here to share with everyone. So just pop that up. Can everyone see that? I'll take that as a yes, because I can't see everyone. And yeah, so the Royal Botanic Gardens run an outreach program, community greening, and within that is the youth community greening program, as well as our Master Gardener program. And we've got a fire recovery program at the moment, which is also helping to create community gardens. Hang on, what happened there? Sorry. Not sure what happened there. It won't let me. Here we go. Yes. So it's our outreach program. It's community led, and we support people living in social housing predominantly, but also refugees. So many of the people that Chris mentioned to create communal food gardens. As Chris mentioned as well, they come in numerous types. Some are memberships, some are just common area gardens, and our gardens vary from 2 to 80 plots, and as Chris mentioned, can be shared, communal, or individual allotment style. So we try to obtain communities' involvement from the design, build, and maintenance of those spaces. We don't maintain those. We empower and support community to maintain those. So our program's motto, people, plants, and place. People come first, and that's the most challenging part of creating communal or community gardening spaces. So we work with a number of different organisations. So for those of you who don't have your own home or are living in social housing, Aboriginal housing and the like, we're here to support people like yourselves to get things started and get a community garden going. So we work all across New South Wales, and our main part of our program is funded by Department of Communities and Justice, but the Royal Botanic Gardens contributions have more or less matched that over the last 23 years that we've been going. So over 1,000 community gardens, and 454 of those are youth-led currently. And we've got a number of case studies there, but I'm not going to go on too much about those. One out at Wilcannia just before the COVID lockdown out there, where we had created a food garden to improve the food security out there. And that had incredible outcomes, but some of the sites the residents weren't able to access through the lockdown. And however, because we set up wicking gardens and self-watering gardens in that far western area, the plants and the crops were able to survive, and we had big cook-ups once we were able to get back out there to meet with the group and re-engage them in that lifelong learning love of learning. So many of the people that we work with have suffered, educational trauma or intergenerational trauma of some kind. And so we've done some very specific research. So in addition to Chris's research in the pandemic garden, it obviously pulled out that a lot of, lower socioeconomic communities benefit the most from community gardens. And that's really fantastic, because that really backs and gives the evidence to our program. But we have our own specific evidence on some of our programs. So we did a 2018 study with Western Sydney University on the perceived health, wellbeing and social benefits for social housing communities in New South Wales. These are all available on our website and also Western Sydney University's website. And then we also more recently did a 3-year study of our Master Gardener program. So that's just one of the more formal workshops or training programs that we deliver as part of our outreach programs out into community. We don't currently deliver this on site, but its curriculum is very much based around people, place, and plants, our theme. So our motto of our program. So and helps people to work together and really focuses on the people side of things, but also on the soil. So from that 2018 research, we've published 5 papers, some as recently as this year, and also, you know, really working hard with a variety of not just Western Sydney University, but academics to promote and you know, really gather further evidence around this, because as Chris mentioned, as Nairi mentioned, and as Tony mentioned, you know, these psychological benefits, when we talk to people about biophilia and introduce them to that concept, they say, yes, that's me, and they really connect and notice what that is. So look, I'm not going to go into all the details of the reports. If you're really interested, you can go and find them for yourself, and we'll share this information you know, after the this session. And but you know, you can see people who weren't eating fruit and vegetables at the start, you know, had improvements in these behaviors, interpersonal outcomes as well. So people had a significant improvement in emotional connection and sense of community, and participants consistently valued the community garden in making positive changes in their lives. So and just to touch on that, I'm going to stop the share of the slides for a sec, because I want to show you a video. But just to touch on that side of things, we talk about their the positive side of things, and the first thing people say to us is, "Oh, it won't work here. Everyone will steal everything, and no one gets along." And as soon as you get a garden out, a bag of soil, everyone comes out and starts talking. And overwhelmingly, that is the initial response we get. Firstly, is it won't work here, everything will get stolen, nobody talks to each other. And in 99% of almost all the circumstances, so much food is grown that it isn't taken and harvested quickly enough. And so we find it's actually the opposite of what people's initial fears are. And I remember Costa talking about this fact as well in another study that was done around gardening, and also in his own experiences, where people were terrified of him growing on his verge garden because people would steal the pumpkins. And he said, Phil, he goes, you know, I hadn't even grown the pumpkins. They were my pumpkins, and people were scared that I was going to lose something I hadn't even grown yet. They hadn't grown it, I was growing it, and they were terrified for me to lose it. And so he said, you know, if people take the pumpkins, then they need the pumpkins. And so in a community garden, we need to accept that there's a little bit of give and take, and that not everybody can be as actively involved as someone questioned in the chat there before. Some people make tea, some people make marmalade, as Chris mentioned. And so we've got a number of sites where you know, there's just so many opportunities for people to be involved in a community garden, and it doesn't need to be physical digging. It doesn't need to be, you know, those things. There's so many other positive opportunities to engage and connect with people to get that nutrient-dense food that Nairi talked about to improve your health. And what better than people who are most in need in our communities often have the poorest of health. We know this through scientific evidence. And so if they can just benefit from some herbs and some fresh, a pinch of herbs, they can benefit from that, and that can have improvements for their health and well-being. So I'm just going to quickly show you that video, because in our program, as I mentioned, it's people, plants and place. The people always comes first. And so let's hear some of their views on our community greening program and our Master Gardener program. So let me just do this. I'll make sure I get the video sound, I think. This is always tricky to get this full screen for you.
My idea was to actually get the community together, and I thought, why not a community garden? The Master Gardener course is a 6-day short course delivered in partnership with TAFE. It's about people, plants and place, teaching people how to work together as a community to grow food for food security.
It's just a matter of just getting everybody together and getting to know each other and becoming involved.
That's it.
Yeah.
We didn't know our neighbours properly. No, we kept to ourselves and all like that. And there's that many come and go, hasn't there?
True.
In this street, yeah.
True. Yeah, we've stuck around for a few years.
That's right, I have.
We finally got to meet each other.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Round the sides, the beans, and in the middle of the peas. Yeah.
These types of collaborations help to create the conditions which reduce inequalities, which enable people to thrive.
Gardening clears my mind, gets my mind off other things that I don't want to think about really. Helping with bending and movements and things with the Parkinson's, it will all help. We'll have to eat healthy out of the garden instead of out of the shops.
I'm really happy in the garden, and it takes all my bad memories of things away.
Yeah, it's good. It's good sort of therapy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Getting out, looking after the plants and giving something back.
This is the only thing that keeps me going. If I didn't have this garden, I don't know what I'd do.
We work with community to co-design and co-build these projects so they have that ownership and a joy and love and confidence of learning. They can also be very proud of what they've achieved within their own community and be part of making that change.
Yeah, well, we're planting purple cauliflowers at the moment.
We've got the iceberg lettuce. They're starting to take their form and curl up and everything, which is really cool. They're looking very healthy.
Always in my happy place when I'm playing in the dirt. I love the dirt. I didn't know my neighbours before, but now I know my neighbours, and they're a great group. They're a great bunch, great sense of humour, and we just love to get together and have a yak and grow things and learn from each other.
Building friendship in the community, building a safe community.
Wonderful, Phil. Was terrific. Thank you. You're a bit of a star in it too.
Yeah, so I feature in there too. So I won't rabble on, but on the Royal Botanic Gardens YouTube channel, there is a playlist of a series of community greening videos, and there's a whole bunch more on the Royal Botanic Gardens Sydney's website. So if you just Google community greening, you can find us. Some of our sites are listed under the Australian City Farms Community Gardens that Chris just spoke about, that network of organisations, and others are just for social housing specifically. So if you'd like to get involved, often it's best, some of our sites are supported by other NGOs, like you saw there, Mission Australia, or sometimes a local community centre, and you can volunteer and support those. So I know that was one of the questions we were going to talk about, how could people be involved in our work? So just reach out, all our information's on our website as well, so if anyone needs further info. Okay.
Great, thanks very much, Phil. All right, now let me invite everyone back, and we'll get underway with some general questions. Everyone's back in. Tony, come and join us. Great, thank you. Now, I just there was one question that came through the chat panel, and even though we've got some ones that we're going to talk about that will be a benefit to everyone listening this morning, there was a question that came through about someone who now has arthritis and finds it more difficult to garden and really wants to keep going. So I guess my question is, if anyone can answer it, are there certain tools that are specially redesigned to help people with disabilities that might have difficulty with their hand to help them to keep gardening? Can anyone answer that question? No? Yes?
Yeah, I can probably answer
that.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Tony.
There are some adaptive tools that are available, secateurs that have a different sort of mechanism so that it's a roll rather than a squeeze, which makes that a lot more easy for using secateurs. There are also various things that you can actually place on your existing tools to help with the grip, to expand the grip. I do a little bit of DIY things as well. For example, getting an old stubby holder. If you're familiar with the foam stubby holder, because people will have difficulty grasping such a firm grasp, when it's expanded, then it becomes easier and softer. So the stubby holder filled with an old tea towel, and put the tool, your spade or something like that, hand tools, into that, then just helps to widen the grip, the handle of those tools. So they're just DIY adaptive methods.
Most of
There's
those
lots of things like that. I'm just trying to think of the place where you get all the adaptive.
That's what I was going to
equipment.
say. Those
Yeah.
all those the sort of places that you do get adaptive equipment, they have a lot of that stuff.
So it's called PAD. Well, it used to be called PADP. It's provision of aids for people with disabilities, and I mean that service has been going for a long time. So there's all sorts of things to help people with disabilities. We might do a bit of research ourselves on a website for that and pop it up after the webinar's finished. Okay, now Nara, you're obviously the famous person who's been on Gardening Australia, and a lot of the people out there, of course, say, can you believe Gardening Australia's been going for so long? It's remarkable, isn't it? And Costa, I'm sure for many people, is a hero to all of us, and he lives locally near me in Sydney, so I often see him surfing. For example, he loves hopping in the water. Now, you talked a lot about the importance of garden and brain health. Is there anything else you'd want to share with us since you did your presentation?
Yeah, I also do a talk back on radio, ABC in Hobart. So that's how actually it came about, because I came on after Tina.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, yeah. Look, anything. Everyone's touched on it, really. Anything that you're doing when you're out in the garden, and certainly even if it's only the tiniest amount that you're growing, even if it's only some herbs, you know, whatever small amount, and don't just think that you have to eat the part of the vegetable that you only see in the supermarket, for example. I mean, we eat a lot of broccoli flowers. And the like, and rocket flowers, because they taste really good, and they're just part of the plant, and the colour in those is different to the leaves in the actual plant. So the antioxidants that are in a yellow thing are different to the antioxidants that are in a green thing. So you just want to mix them up.
Aren't they also the most nutrient dense part of the plant, because all the energy is put into that one thing for its reproduction? So obviously flowers have often got seeds and things starting to form in them, so they're pretty intense with those. Often,
from the point of view of maybe a bit of protein in seeds, but the antioxidants and the anti-inflammatory components come from thousands of different chemicals, all of which fortunately have a different color. So the dark green, the light green, the purple, the pink, the white. Don't forget the white, you know, the flesh of an apple, the flesh of a potato, a cauliflower, very high in really useful antioxidants, but they're not green or purple or pink. So I always just say to people, well, protein's important, but put a protein food at the center of your plate and then surround that with as many colors as you can. It doesn't matter where those colors come from. It just means, and if edible flowers are one of the colours, that's just another source of antioxidants. It just gives you options, so you don't have to be worrying about whether you've had 3 cups of this and 2 cups of that. So boring.
Yes. And you know, once upon a time, I used to just use because I can grow herbs. That's one thing I can grow. But I used to just use the top part, and because now I use the whole lot. You know, I mean, my mother used to she'd say, just take the top bit off and get rid of the stem part. No,
the stem of parsley that's gone to craziness is fabulous stuff.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Thanks, Nara. Now, Tony, there are some people out there that might just be starting to grow their own veggie garden, or, you know, a lot of people have made a comment on Q&A and chat about the raised garden beds and the small ones you can buy, and how terrific that is for people that have downsized or move into smaller places. So what do you think it's the most important thing to consider to be successful in growing your own veggies?
Three things that I think are important to consider. And the first one is your expectations. Manage your expectations. How much time do you have to put into caring for your veggies? Growing veggies is a little bit more work than some other gardening, and it does need to have those fertilizers and different things, and checking for pests and diseases. So and watering, because they're annual plants, they do need a little bit more TLC. So what's your expectation? Don't overcommit. So the second one, start small. So manage your expectations, and then also just start small. Start with a few containers, or just a simple no dig raised garden bed that is easy to maintain for you. And then the last thing is make sure you've got enough sun. Veggies need at least 6 hours of sun to do well. You can grow some leafy crops in less than 6 hours of sun. So if you don't get that full 6 hours of sun, then stick with some of those leafy crops, those vegetables that need a little bit more water compared to the amount of sun. But for all veggies to do their best, they will need 6 hours of sun. So measure that amount of sun that you get in your garden, and perhaps monitor where you're actually going to place your garden to get the maximized benefits.
And Phil's just added soil. Soil's important. Get really good soil. Yep.
Yes,
if you've got,
absolutely.
That's it. If you've got all of those mycology, living and live and thriving soil with diverse ingredients, then you will get all those antioxidants and the most nutrient dense food that you will have. And that's the most important part about growing your own food. If you want food that's covered in chemicals, go and buy it from the shops. That's what we always say to people. It's much better to have your wholly veggies, as we mentioned before, that have been grown in beautiful soil, than it is buying some of these things from our factory farms and what have you these days that are on much degraded soil and with chemical fertilizers. So we get a much better diet, and you can have a much better healthy outcome from even a smaller quantity.
I would totally agree with that. And if you want to save yourself some money, rather than buying fertilizers, then get yourself a worm farm. And you can get smaller worm farms so that you can actually have them even in the laundry or somewhere easily accessible for you. And if you don't have a lot of veggie scraps or a lot of waste, but you're still wanting to get that, then a worm farm is a great way to do that. And you get the castings and the worm juice from the worm farm, and that can really help with the production of your veggies.
Great, thanks, Phil and Tony. Chris, there's been a few questions also about people wanting to set up their community garden. I know we're sort of running short of time, so folks out there, well, let me have a look at the time. We might go till about 5 past 10 past 12 because everyone's interested in the topic. So, Chris, if people wanted to set up a community garden, give them a few ideas. They could go to the website. Is that a good place to start?
Yes, look, I think it is a good place to start because there's FAQs, there's some fact sheets that help out, and it does depend where you're going to set it up. I mean, obviously you need to find some land, and then that land is owned by somebody. If it's invariably the council or state crown or whatever. So there's negotiations that need to be made there. But who does the negotiation is the question, and you do need a core of people who bring certain skills together, and you'll find that they do. And it's the same as any organisation. Then it needs to have a sense of purpose. There are certain regulations that are required if you're going to operate as a group, and the way of getting access to money needs invariably either a sponsor of some sort, like a auspicing body, or for the group to be an incorporated association themselves. You know, and there's some costs associated with that. There's obviously procedures, establishing an organisation, having general meetings and those kinds of things. But essentially, I wouldn't do it if you haven't got 10 people who are committed to the cause for a good while, so that you can get it going. And then you've got something to show people. People can come on and you can develop and have succession thereafter. But a couple of people think that a community garden is a good idea, and them being the only ones doing it is not a recipe for success.
Great, thank you. And just while you've still got the platform there, there's another question here about, so what happens if you do set up a community garden? Who looks after the pest issues and the crop protection and all those sorts of things?
Look, what happens is people do bring skills, and if there's any doubt that you know, or say for instance that you haven't got anybody who understands in much detail those concerns, there's advice on that you can get from other gardens through various social media networks, but also the departments of primary industry or agriculture in each state are pretty keen to make sure that gardeners in the suburbs, whatever they do, are aware of issues of pest management. And they put out circulars and have a good relationship usually with characters like me in each state. And we send out information, particularly where there's some news or some activity or particular procedures that need to be followed at that time.
Now, Phil, thank you very much, Chris. So across to you, Phil. I think your video just showed us in a very impactful way the importance of gardening for people's mental health, for their social connection. I guess there might be some people out there who would like to volunteer for such programs, and obviously you run these community development programs. How could people volunteer for such programs?
So, look, as our program is so broad across New South Wales and working with many different partners, it's very hard to volunteer with us because of the travel and different areas we work in. But I did mention in my talk a little bit about we can connect you with a local service, and then I think it's more about whether you fit with that local group. And as Chris mentioned, you know, to start a community garden, you need 10 like-minded individuals. The hardest part about community gardening is obviously working together, and that's the biggest skill that everyone needs to kind of learn. And it's kind of like a movement in itself, is the you know, the being able to understand and you know, use emotional intelligence to you know, change how you react and communicate with others. And these are very important skills that you need to kind of work together. So as you volunteer, you might need to kind of, you know, visit a couple of different groups and see which is the best fit that suits your type and how you can help and fit in. So we can introduce people to local services, but you can also go and reach out to your local community garden group to volunteer with them, or local community centres that we support, or other non-government organisations. So as you mentioned, there's huge benefits for people, but particularly those that are suffering from, you know, PTSD and other clinically diagnosed, but also just, as you mentioned, loneliness. As we all get older, we don't have access to these things as much anymore. And I think somebody said, you know, I'd love to garden, but I have arthritis. Well, why not join a community garden? And you can go along and you can be the tea maker. You could be maybe you can still make amazing pickles or jams, and you can help them to raise money. You don't need to modify tools and be able to dig in the soil. You pay your membership for some of these gardens, and you contribute physically in your own capacity. And I think that's sometimes, you know, other than the people saying everything gets stolen, is that, and I think Tony mentions this, is the harvest high. Is people say everything gets stolen, but then all of a sudden they're on their harvest high, and it really changes how people, you know, really start to think, and kind of gives them such a big boost in I think we find the biggest boost is in their self-confidence. So a lot of people know how to garden, but they just lack the confidence to do it. And I think by working with others and working with other organizations, you build yourself self-confidence. And I think programs like Tony's, that what she does as well, can help with that if people kind of, access the online support and join up and gain that sort of thing. But then also Australian Community Garden Network, that Chris has got a whole load of resources online about how to start a garden. They're really great because they very much come from that grassroots up model, which is the most important way to go. You don't want to just sort of say, well, I'm going to build a community garden, just me. You need that group to start with, otherwise they won't have that ownership on the space. So I think those are those really important factors to make sure that the well-being outcome is what you want. And I think Tony mentioned it in regard to harvest. So just quickly as well, is joining or starting a community garden group. Make sure you have expectations in mind that are on par with the rest of the group, because so many people think I'm going to go and I'm going to be best friends with everyone. That's just not going to happen. You may find a good friend, you may not. You may just find a group of acquaintances that you can garden with and get along with, or you may just not fit in and you might need to work somewhere else. So manage those expectations around well-being, because it is no point persisting going, this is good for me, I know it is, but why am I not getting on with everyone? You need to sort of perhaps change how you're reacting or how you're fitting into that group, but also maybe looking at this, maybe another group is set for me. So because if we persist with something that's not working, that isn't going to be good for our health and well-being.
And probably the other point that I would say to people out there, if you physically can't do some of the gardening that you used to, I think we often forget that older people are very good at transferring their knowledge and experience to other people, to younger people. So there could be a role there that if you're a very experienced gardener or you've learned a lot of things over the years, you mightn't be able to physically do it again, but you could transfer that knowledge and expertise to other
100%.
people. And
I don't know if you noticed in that video, but there was some young people, heaven forbid, that were very much engaged in growing. And when we started that garden, that one particular site that we were working on there was on the mid-north coast, and they were extremely impacted by food security, floods, and what have you. Moments before we started that garden, it was started probably 6 months prior to the floods. But they really immediately valued what they'd done, and is a real incredible sense of achievement and accomplishment for them. But it's very much engaged the young people. And Auntie Julie, so there's a number of Aboriginal elders that are working in that garden there that were speaking on camera and participating there, that are amazing picklers, but also have cultural and plant use knowledge that many people desire. And so it's a fantastic group to have that mix of older and younger people connecting.
Absolutely. All right, folks, look, we're going to draw this to a close. It's just been terrific. Thank you so much to our speakers. So Nari, thank you. Don't go yet. To you, Tony, thanks, Chris and Phil. I think we've learnt so much this morning, as we do with all of our conversations and webinars. And people out there, keep gardening. But before I go on to a few other things, could each of you just tell us, what does gardening mean personally to you? So start with you, Nari. What does it mean to you personally?
Well, it's a mixture of things. It does drive me crazy a lot of the time. I think most people get that at times. It's very, it's just mind, being able to settle into it, have a little process, when it gets, have a little glass house. So, the little seedlings I put in there while it's still cold in Tassie. It's that sort of process of doing that, I think. And, knowing that even if you only pick, I don't know, half a handful of rocket and a few leaves of kale, whatever happens to be in the garden, that you're getting huge benefit from it. And the things I don't eat, you can probably hear them. I have chickens, they eat, and then I get really good eggs. So it doesn't matter. At the moment, I've got a whole patch of Russian kale, not my favourite thing, but it's just reseeded, and one whole area is just, but it's all right, it's just a forest of it, and the chickens get it every day, so they're happy.
And now you can tell many people have said thank you to your rooster for joining us.
It's a funny thing. You're lucky you didn't get the guinea fowl as well, because they're much noisier, and they have this terrible habit of standing outside the window and screeching during webinars.
I love it.
I don't know what it is.
Love it.
And the other thing is, please get yourself a copy of the book. Go to the website, Brain Body Food.
Good, good. Thank you very much, Nari. To you, Tony, what does it mean personally to you to do gardening?
Look, it's everything to me. I can't imagine a life without my garden. I tell a lot of people that I turned a preoccupation into an occupation.
Yes.
So, like my mum, who is 85 and gets out into the garden every day, and she says, if not for the garden, what else would I do with myself? And I can see myself growing into that exact same philosophy as well.
Right, thank you. To you, Chris, what does gardening mean? Well, you're like me, you don't have a green thumb, but we do a bit of gardening.
Yes, it's kind of life, really. It's a connection with life, because when it's going on in the garden, even if you're not there, and every time you go out there, there's a new piece of evidence that it is going on.
Yes, it's lovely. It's life. That's right. And to you, Phil, what does it mean to you?
Oh, I think Tony mentioned something about it. You know, it's innate. It's in our DNA. We, you know, and I said to somebody in the chat there, they said, I know a few people that don't like nature, and we all know those people who cut down all the trees when they move into an area that they've moved into that's lovely and green. But I think, you know, nature is us. We are nature. How can you not like us? and for me personally, it's how I connect. It's how I learn. You know, our whole team, there's 10 of us working all over New South Wales with young people. And we all say, if we haven't learned something when we meet a group, then we're not doing our job. It's not just about teaching, but it's about sharing and learning. So, you know, gardening, no matter where you go, it's always different. Climates, microclimates, soils. It's just such a fun thing to do. Gives you the harvest high, as Tony said. And it really connects us all together, because we need to feed ourselves, and we are part of nature. So I think it's just how we connect, and it's how we learn. And it's
yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And of course, all of us can learn so much from our First Nations people, and the importance of land and sea, which all of us could take on board. Well, thank you, folks. Now, just a couple of things. Stay with us, panelists. We've only got a couple of more minutes to go. As we mentioned to you, all of this information will be up on our website, on COTA New South Wales website, and also on our YouTube channel. So bear with us. It takes a few days to put all the information up. And please share all of this information and the video with your friends and family. That's terrific to get this information out to as many people as possible. So our theme for October is around mental health, and that's very important as we've had to struggle through the last 2.5 years, and COVID hasn't gone away yet. So I'm sure as part of our mental health webinar, we'll be able to refer to some of the things that we've talked about today, which is so important for people's mental health. Just to remind everyone that we have our community speakers program. All of those people are volunteers. They have been trained about particular topics. So if you want to call one of our community speakers, you can do that by phone, and you can also do it through our website. So guess what? Nearly finished, but I'm going out to do a bit of gardening. No, I'm going out to actually water, because where I am, we've had a fair bit of rain, but there is something just, I like the smell. I like the action of watering, but I also like the smell that it gives us. You can tell I'm quite a sensory person. So thank you again, Nari. Thank you, Tony. Chris, thanks so much. And to you, Phil, keep up the great work. It's just amazing what you do. So I'll say goodbye to everyone, and
thank you.
Out to the garden, folks. Bye for now.